Awesome. So great to have you all with us. Thank you for your patience. We have lots of wonderful guests that are coming to speak today. So thank you so much for attending. We are also recording this for those that couldn't make it today. And if there's anything that you wanted to hear again, it will be posted on our website and social media. But I do want to seriously thank you all for taking time out to come hear a lot about the new laws that we have that are going to go into effect July 1st, if they haven't already gone into effect. And we're also going to hear a presentation about what's coming from the American Rescue Plan, what it means for Virginia. And we'll also hear from the Virginia Poverty Law Center. As you may know, the eviction moratorium is coming to an end at the end of this month. So what does that mean for renters? What does that mean for landlords? And what are some updates from the Unemployment Commission case and what's happening with them? So we have lots to cover, so we'll jump right into it. I invited some of my friends to come talk about the bills that they worked on because we covered so much ground, and I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to tell you about 3 of their bills. Now, we could carry 7 this last session, and we carried even more in 2020. And so it's a lot to cover, but today we're just gonna highlight 3 of the bills that my friends are coming to talk about. And so we're gonna start with Leader Charnel Herring of the 46th District in Northern Virginia. Delegate Herring, take it away.
Thank you so much, Delegate Price. And I will say, I hope for everybody who is represented by Delegate Price, you have an amazing delegate, and she's done so much work and so incredible work, especially on voting rights. And so it's just an honor to serve with her. And so I just have to say that, and I'm sure you all have heard about it, but her Voting Rights Act is probably a leader in the nation when it comes to voting rights. So with that, I want to just talk about some of the bills that I carried that meant a lot to me. First is the for restoring rights to felons, their political rights. That would be voting rights, allowing those with past convictions to serve on juries and be a notary. And that, I just think it's so important. We know the history of felon disenfranchisement. But with those with conviction who have served their time and are released, for total integration into society means that they should have their voting rights back. So it's not a done deal yet. We've got one more time to do it. Next session, we have to pass it again, and then it will go to the ballot for Virginia voters, so we can amend our Constitution to allow automatic restoration. The other piece of legislation I wanted to share with you all is the Virginia Clean Slate Act. This is something that I've been very passionate about. If you think about expungement, that's essentially what it is, except we have a sort of a heightened sealing process. The Virginia Clean Slate Act will address crimes such as marijuana possession and some certain misdemeanor crimes, trespassing, underage alcohol possession, and most of the non-stacking offenses. So for example, DUIs are not included, or domestic assault and battery. What's important about this bill is that it's automatic. Part of the allowance is that no one has to retain an attorney to go to court. It's done automatically. And in fact, with the marijuana convictions, misdemeanor convictions, the process will actually start July 1. And my little update is that the state police have already, they're almost ready with the systems ready to go, which is great. And then the last one is the marijuana legalization bill, which allows simple possession of marijuana, which is only an ounce, up to an ounce, with no penalties and fines. We set up the cannabis authority that will start the regulatory process of marijuana for retail sales, but we have to pass the legislation again because it was subject to a reenactment. And those are my 3, Delegate Price.
Awesome. So I do want to ask if you could tell us about your favorite moment from this past session.
I think my favorite moment was when we finally passed that Virginia Clean Slate Act. I believe that this is about restorative justice and second chances. And we finally came out of the dark ages, Virginia, to be probably one of the leading states when it comes to cleaning up someone's record. And that was my proudest moment, my most exciting moment, because we had tried it last year and the Senate was as a barrier, but it finally happened this year, and I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you
Thank
can,
you.
please stick around for the questions. Next, we are going to have the chairman of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, who represents the 74th District, based out of Henrico, Delegate Lamont Bagby. Take it away.
Hello, thank you, and thank you for putting this together. And it's awesome to see everyone and actually just be reminded of the work that we were able to accomplish, but also be reminded of some of the things that we did not get across the finish line. But the three things that I am most proud of and pleased that actually a patron and then just work alongside with someone on would be the first thing would be the legislation that we worked on collectively, and this was us working with the Senate, the governor's administration, hospitals, university hospitals, all types of nurses, EMS workers, and that legislation was focused on making sure that we were able to get everyone that was able to and was trained to provide shots, to get them on the list so that we can expand the individuals that are able to put shots in arms. And so that was one of the things that I think that was key to us being able to open things back up and also be more aggressive with inoculation. And so the second thing that I'm proud of, it would be, and it pales in comparison to the work that you did, Delegate Price, related to voting rights. But I'm so pleased that we were able to finally make voting on Sundays a thing. For many years, politicians, black, white, would go into churches and encourage them to vote. And for the first time this coming November, you will see across the Commonwealth many places opening up their voting booths on Sunday. So you can go to church, you can go vote, and then you can go to brunch all on Sunday as a family. And I primarily did that because we were looking at places when we opened up the early voting last year of 2020, we saw that Saturday was one of the days that the lines were extremely long and could be discouraging, but this weekend is also the time where families can, or individuals can vote. And so we wanted to make sure we expanded that. And so Sunday voting is a thing in Virginia now, and I'm so happy about that. The third thing would be EV, electric vehicles. And it took bringing in a lot of groups. It was the biggest thing on the list for Legal Conservation Voters and Sierra Club and all the other environmental groups. But it's something that the manufacturers were afraid of, the auto dealers were afraid of. And at the end of the day, we got together and worked it out. And so EVs are coming to Virginia more aggressively. No longer will Maryland and other states eat our lunch and take our vehicles. Is a mandate that we get our 8% of EVs at least in Virginia. We'll build that up with rebates and infrastructure.
Awesome, thank you. And so we definitely want to tell the people that the bill that was done for the Sunday voting allowed for your locality to be able to choose if they're going to do it and how often they would do that Sunday voting. So definitely reach out to your voting registrar and to the electoral board to make sure you let them know that it's something that you want in your area and something that you want to make widely available as well. So Delegate Bagby, tell us, what was your favorite moment from the 2021 session?
I was trying to think. I heard you Leader Herring that question, and I think one of the things that I was most encouraged about, and this may be petty, but as we progressed through the the session, we heard Republicans get up time and time again about how we were responding to COVID-19, but they had no ideas of how to get out of that. And as we progressed through the session, and we were working collectively with members in the community, localities, and really working hard to make sure that folks get shots in arms, and also make sure that folks will continue to be tested and do all these things. I think I was encouraged when that stopped, because what we had been working on started taking effect. So that may be petty, but it's real life.
It's fair. It's fair. And we do want to say we were able to, a lot of us are able to get out more and start having events in person. This one is virtual. We're hoping our next town hall will be in person. And that is because of the amazing job that health officials and that health departments have been doing in order to make sure that the vaccinations are widely available. In Newport News and Hampton, we have one on Ward Boulevard and one at the Coliseum that are walk-in. You don't even have to have an appointment. We'll make sure that in the follow-up email, you have all of their hours of operation. So if you still need to get your vaccination, you can easily. So thank you for that, Delegate Bagby. And now we are going to hear from Queen Godmother, the chair, the chair of the Labor and Commerce Committee, and right here from Hampton in the 92nd District, Chairwoman Ward. If you would, please take it away.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. It is certainly an honor to be here, especially with Delegate Marcia Price. Many of you may not even know that our two locals are next to each other. As a matter of fact, I have one side of the street, she has the other side of the street. So, I mean, we are just that close, and it is an honor to serve with her also. I know for myself and for some other members in the General Assembly on our side, at least we think of her as truly what her name is. Delegate Marcia, the CIA Price. You can always count on her, just like the CIA. She's going to gather all the information. She's going to process it. She's going to analyze every single bill, and she's going to let us know what her findings are. And normally she's going to let us know how we should vote. So you in the 95th House District are really, really honored to have her as your legislator. And now for myself, I want to tell you a little bit about this year that one of my bills came into effect, and that was increasing the minimum wage. And that became effective in May of this year. So for over a decade, the minimum wage had been at only $7.25 an hour. And now today, these checks are coming back with people making $9.50 an hour at least. This has had an impact on over 400,000 Virginians. And we're not stopping there. We are increasing the minimum wage incrementally until we get to $15 an hour, or $15 an hour. And next year, the minimum wage will be $11 an hour. And by 2023, it's going to be $12 an hour. So we are doing things that the federal government hasn't even been able to do yet. So here, Virginia, you can really be proud of what we are doing in the General Assembly. Another bill I'd like to talk about, and some of our bills are big boom bills that everybody hears about, but then there are some bills that only affect a small group of people, but a significant group, and a group that is so glad it was done. We extended the deadline for teachers, anyone that is certified by the Department of Education. So teachers have had a hard time. They've been teaching virtual, and then they have to go back into class, and some of them are doing it at home, and some of them are doing it in school. So it's sort of difficult. So, and to put on top of that, to get recertified, and some of it is coursework. There's a lot of professional development. There is so much that has to be done. And so for that reason, we were able to, the bill that I carry allowed a 2-year extension for teachers to get it. And also for the first time, normally there are no waivers, but for teachers who are provisional teachers, they will also have an additional 2 years. So for that group of people, that bill meant a lot. And that includes me, because I'm up for recertification this year too, if anybody want to know. And what's so scary about it, once I get recertified, people, I will be certified to teach until I'm 78 years old. Be careful with your children. And the third bill I just want to talk about quickly is a bill, again, that does not get in the headlines, but for your locality, it may mean the world. And that's a clutter bill. And that was about the hardest bill I had to pass. And it only applies if your locality wants it. So if there are neighborhoods or a house in your neighborhood and there is just clutter, and what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about a messy yard. I'm talking about there are piles of tires, maybe home improvement, toilets, sinks outside, all in a pile. That is what we're saying, that your city government can then decide that they will remove that clutter. So that is a bill, again, that doesn't seem important to many people, but if you live in a neighborhood with that type of clutter, that's important to you. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Ward. And I'm going to ask you a different question because I know that you've been working not only on your own legislation, but as chair of a committee, you are very instrumental in trying to champion and make sure that good bills get through the committee. So I just wanted to see, like, what do you think from your perspective is the impact that we've been able to make in 2020 and 2021? Because we haven't even touched what we did in 2020. There is a previous town hall that you can see on our social media for that. But what do you think is that impact?
Well, really, when we came into the majority, Virginia was the best place for business and was number 51 for workers. That means we were really bad. And I believe now we have made so much progress that we are no longer in last place. Our workers now have a lot more protections. We have also passed collective bargaining. We've made sure that workers are paid for all the time that they are working. So there's a lot of things. We've got a lot of worker protection now on the job. We're taking care of repetitive motion. So we're doing a lot for workers, and there's a lot more that we want to do also.
Awesome. Well, I definitely enjoyed working with you on making sure that even with the minimum wage increase, we had to make sure that even more people were eligible to get minimum wage because the Minimum Wage Act of Virginia actually carved people out of it. So we were putting more people into that. So your bill accomplished that. And we also worked together on preventing or enforcing wage theft. So like you said, people, when they do the work, they get the pay that they deserve. And so thank you for your hard work on that.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to go to another chair. We have Chairman Marcus Simon, who is a family man and a delegate today, but he is the chair of the Privileges and Elections Committee and also chair of the Housing and Consumer Protection Subcommittee on General Laws. And so we both work on those issues together. So Delegate Simon, take it away.
Thank you, Delegate Price. It's great to be with you. We do spend a lot of time together, legislating together in the General Assembly. I am the chairman of the Privileges and Elections Committee. What CMA not have told you, she is the vice chair of Privileges and Elections. So she's my right hand on that committee. And we don't have vice chairs on subcommittees, but if we did, she would be my vice chair on. She's the senior member and the person literally at my right hand on the Housing and Consumer Protection Subcommittee. We work together a great deal on those issues, and she is this is for all, I feel like I'm talking to you or your constituents, but let's say, I'll talk about you in the third person, to your constituents. She is an outstanding and essential member of both committees, very thoughtful, always comes to committee prepared, understands what's before us, has read the bills, knows what questions to ask, and does the work ahead of time. This is what a lot of people don't understand. So much of the work gets done before we get to the dais to get everybody on the same page. And that's why her bills are successful. They don't always come out the way she put them in, but she's fantastic collaborating with all the different, I use the word stakeholders because it's like a buzzword, but everybody who's got an interest in a particular topic, make sure everybody's had a chance to be heard, incorporate their changes, address their concerns so that we have a better product coming out. So with that, I say that in a way because part of being a chairman and a subcommittee chairman is I don't always get to do, my bills don't always get to pass, but I spend a lot of time working on other people's bills. So I'm going to break your rule a little bit, mostly because I didn't have 3 interesting bills that passed. I had one bill of mine that passed, which isn't even that interesting, which changes the way we do electronic notaries in Virginia. During the pandemic, we've had an electronic notary law in Virginia since 2007. We're one of the first states to start to do electronic notarization. And this year with the pandemic, people were looking for alternatives to sitting around in person to do business, and the need to actually figure out how to do a notary without being in the same room as somebody became essential. And so what we found was that we were a leader in that 15 years ago. But like a lot of things, there was some catching up with the technology that needed to be done. So that bill had an emergency clause passed pretty much unanimously, I think, from both houses. And so I was glad to work on that. And so folks that have had to do refinance transactions, anybody who's had to do business at a bank or with any document that needs to be witnessed by somebody during the pandemic, you were able to do that. You're able to do that now more easily electronically. The other bill I want to talk about, y'all have probably heard a lot in the news about what's happening with the ease of voting and absentee voting around the country. And there's states around the country that are making it more difficult to cast ballots unless you actually are able to show up between a narrow set of hours at a specific polling place, which may not be that close to your home. In Virginia, everything you're hearing about happening in other states, we did the opposite in Virginia over the last 2 years. And this year in particular, we made permanent a lot of things that we did on an emergency basis over the summer. So just like Delegate Bagby's piece was part of this, allowing localities allowing early voting on Sundays, we've expanded early voting number of days. We've made more locations available. We've made it easier to vote by mail. We've made it easier to fix a ballot. One of the things that you're seeing happen with all these audits in places like Arizona is they're looking for ways to not count people's ballots. And in Virginia, we took steps to make sure every ballot gets counted. So if you have a problem, if you fill out your absentee ballot wrong, you'll have an opportunity to cure it and come into the registrar's office and fix that. So as a committee, that wasn't my bill. Skylar Van Valkenburg is the chair of the elections process subcommittee, carried it, but it was really a collective effort of all of us at Privileges and Elections and the Democratic Caucus generally to make sure we expanded. We rolled everybody's ideas into this one big bill to make voting as easy as possible. And you'll see that in November. If you didn't see it already during the primary, you'll see it in November. You got more opportunities to vote early and more easily and when it's convenient for you, and also opportunities to fix your ballots if you make a mistake so your ballot doesn't get thrown out on a technicality. And then the third bill I wanted to talk about briefly on the Housing and Consumer Protection Subcommittee. And then this one went through civil subcommittee courts in the Senate, which were into a little bit of difficulty. But one of the things we found, we've provided tenant protections for evictions, and I know you guys are going to hear some more about that, what happens when the moratoria ends. But one of the things that some landlords were doing to get around the protections that we put in place for tenants during the pandemic was to do old-fashioned self-help, what we call illegal. Well, they're illegal. They're called self-help evictions. Where essentially it's like, I may not be able to evict you, so I will just cut off the power to your house. I will just call the water company, and I'll tell them to turn off the water. And when you leave to go to work or to go pick up your kids from school, I'm going to put your stuff on the curb and change the locks on the house. And we've steepened the penalty for that kind of activity this year, thanks to a bill that Sally Hudson carried through the Housing Subcommittee, and we helped shape that and then help make sure that I was on the conference committee with Delegate Hudson and Senator Peterson and some other skeptics in the Senate. And we had to make sure during that conference committee that bill came out okay. And so one of the things we've done is make it much more expensive and less enticing for landlords to attempt to do an illegal eviction. Also sped up access to the courts for tenants who feel like they've been illegally evicted from their home. So those are the three bills I sort of wanted to highlight. And then depending on what question I get, I have another bill I may or may not talk about.
Well, just answer whichever one you want. Is it your favorite moment?
Well, it's sort of both. So my favorite moment, and also as chairman of Privileges and Elections, so these go together. We had a bill at Senator Spruill down in y'all's area, a little further south, down Chesapeake, but we had a bill to change the May municipal election dates, move all of our elections from May to November now. So we had some localities that were reluctant to do that. We had a public hearing where we took testimony, and there were probably 35 or 40 people that signed up to speak. Everybody that spoke in favor of the bill were citizens and residents and activists and community leaders. Everybody that spoke against moving the elections were mayors or vice mayors or city council people who like doing their elections in May, and that was a tough lift. And it was not with a lot of these things, as you know, we work it out. We do our best to work it out ahead of time. So a lot of times before we call the roll, we know what the vote's going to be. This one was a tight one, and I was working hard on behalf of somebody else. And you heard a couple of the speeches I gave on that one, and it was one I felt passionate about. So to get that bill passed was one of the highlights of this most recent session for me.
Awesome. Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about everything that we did in 2020, but I did want to uplift that no excuse early voting. So it's not even just absentee voting by mail, but the early voting in person. We also got to that 45 days from last year with Delegate Herring's bill, HB1. So voting rights is definitely something that we'll talk about in just a bit. I'll expound upon that, but thank you, Delegate Simon. And so next we will hear from the fiery, the passionate, and the always prepared Delegate Scott from the 80th District based in Portsmouth, who had a pretty big day the other day. So I'm hoping that he'll discuss some of that a little bit. If not, I'll help him. But Delegate Scott, go for it.
First of all, thank you for having me. I always love to be in the room with you. I'm gonna learn a lot. I know you're I consider you along with Marcus, the queen of voting rights, and making sure that you protect marginalized communities. You're very passionate about that, and I really appreciate the work that you've done in that area. I learned from you. I read your stuff. That's how I know what's going on. So I really appreciate it. That's why I follow you on Twitter. Make sure I don't miss nothing. But you know, I'm gonna stick to the script. I think I got 3 minutes, so I'm gonna talk about 3 bills real quick. The first thing, I'm gonna merge these together. I'm a freshman, y'all, so it's like whatever I've done, I'm gonna count it all. I only had once. It's been one long session. I'll look at it like that. It's hard to believe we've done so much in about what 16, 17 months since January 8th when I was sworn in. It's amazing. But the first bill I wanted to talk about was the earned sentence credit bill that passed. That basically is a model prisoner bill, which allowed people who are in prison to be able to earn more good time right now in Virginia. 15%, I mean, they only earn 15% off if they're doing everything right. The bill now gives a large number of folks the opportunity to earn 50% off. It excluded some folks, and hopefully we'll go back and try to add some more folks, but it excluded some folks with violent crimes, what they call violent crimes and sex offenses. But I would think that we would want to rehabilitate everybody. So hopefully we can have that conversation, but it allowed people to get up to 50% off of their time. The second bill that I'm proud of, and it affects, I guess, Newport News in a way, and over here where I am in Portsmouth, because the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, ironically, is actually in Portsmouth. But it was a bill to prevent discrimination in apprenticeship programs based on sex, race, gender, or gender identification. So I'm really proud of that bill. That bill was a bill that put us in line with what the Obama administration had already done, which was to prevent that type of discrimination for folks who wanted to enter apprenticeship programs. And then the third bill is the bill that Delegate Price just alluded to, the probation reform bill, where we limited the amount of time that people would be surprised to know that people can actually be on probation almost for life. But we limited the cap, put a cap on the amount of time people can be on probation for felonies to 5 years. And yes, people are on probation for misdemeanors for a while in Virginia too, and we capped that at 3 years. And then we limited the impact for a first technical violation, which are things as simple as going across state lines, or getting a positive urine screen, or switching addresses without telling someone, or switching jobs without telling someone, or losing employment without telling someone, or getting a new job without telling someone. So all of those types of things we listed as technical violations. We defined them in the bill, and now the bill was placed in the law. We had some celebrities come in on Thursday, but it's amazing what can happen when folks have been impacted by these issues, and then they get the opportunity to help change the system. And that's kind of why you saw the Meek Mills and other folks from around the country come in. One of the things I was going to address too, since you, Alma, asked this is part of my favorite part of the session last year, was I was sitting on my couch on the day after Christmas, and I'm looking, and I just kind of groomed through Twitter, and I saw that I had an inbox message from Van Jones. And that was just so cool because somebody like that would see something that I'm doing and want to help. And that's kind of how this whole thing steamrolled. And then my favorite moment in the session was that trying to coordinate to get Van Jones to testify on this probation reform bill, which he did. So that was kind of cool. And so it just kind of highlights the importance of the work that we do and how many folks that it can impact, not only here in Virginia, but from around the nation. So it was kind of cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate Scott. And just in case, if you weren't paying attention, no judgment, but if you didn't know, the House was completely virtual for our special session at the end of last year and our regular session for this year. So trying to get all of the pieces. But one of the really cool things that, Delegate Scott just described was a lot more people were able to participate than before, because let's say you need childcare or you don't have transportation or you just can't take off work long enough to go hang out with us in Richmond all day, then you were able to know when the committee meeting was going to be, sign up and either do written testimony through the online portal, or you were able to stay and be a part of the meeting, ask your question, make your statement for the bill right there in live time. So that's what he was talking about with his guest for his bill, and it really able to pull in international testimony from around, seriously, from various different topics. And that led to better legislation because we were able to hear their concerns, make some adjustments. So we are looking forward to some of these things that came out of an unfortunate situation with COVID, but keeping it moving forward in a hybrid way so that accessibility is still in place. So thank you, Delegate Scott. And I
Thank you
do
for having
think
me.
yeah, and I do think, you say people come to me for voting rights. I know that a lot of people come to you for justice reform, because we truly are trying to take the criminal justice system into a true justice system, and you are doing amazing work in that. So thank you.
And I thank you. And I thank, all of the folks that are on this phone call, all of the delegates, man. We have an amazing caucus that support these issues, that push this. And even though I get the privilege of introducing the bill, I feel the fight that comes from all of us. And that's what makes it so cool. I don't own any of this stuff. We all own it together. And that's what's so great about it. I appreciate it.
That is word. So thank you. Thank you. We know that Delegate Scott has to go. We'll excuse him this time. But the other delegates, if you can stay for questions, that would be great. Next up, we're coming back hometown. Right beside the 95th district that I have the honor of representing, we have Delegate Simons, who represents the 94th district, which is completely in the city of Newport News, and really excited about the work that she's doing, especially with the environment. Not a lot of people really understand that the environment, sometimes it gets portrayed as like polar bears and ice caps, things that seem so far away, but it is really, really about climate justice and things that are going on in our local area, and making sure that we definitely have a healthy earth to give to our next generations. So really appreciate the work that you're doing. Delegate Simons, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for having us all. And you do such a great job connecting Newport News to what's happening in the Virginia House, and we really appreciate that. Delegate Price and I both serve on the Privileges and Elections Committee, and she is one of our leaders. She's the chair of the Voting Rights Subcommittee, and overall vice chair of the committee. And it was really nice to be able to work with her on a few bills last session dealing with tied elections. Because some of you may remember, I'm the one vote wonder of Virginia, and I have a little experience with tied elections. And together we fixed up some of the problems that I experienced back in 2017. But it's been really exciting to be in the General Assembly. I'm fortunate I had 6 of my 7 bills passed last session, and that was creating a Secretary of Labor position for the Commonwealth. And hopefully that's gonna help us get organized around some of our unemployment issues that we have in the state. I also passed a human trafficking bill, a bill to allow more gun safety research, and an apprenticeship study bill. And those of you who remember me on the Newport News School Board will know that I've been talking about STEM education and making sure our kids have exposure to technology for a really long time. And this session, I was finally able to get a couple of bills passed in that area. And both of them, one creates a STEM advisory board, and another one does kind of an evaluation of the way we teach computer science. And both of them, the goal really is to know what it is we're doing and to see where the gaps are and if we're doing it equitably, and making sure that all of our students have more access to computer science and STEM education. And, you know, those are some of my accomplishments, but I also just wanted to mention some things that are still in progress, because I think it's really important for our constituents to know like where the fault lines are and where they might be able to push and kind of help us get some things passed. And two things that I will be working on, and Marcia mentioned, environmental justice. I was the patron of a bill that didn't make it this session, but we just have to require that we have good government policies on environmental justice, all the way from the state level down to the local level, so that Black and Brown communities are not bearing a disproportionate burden of pollution around the Commonwealth. And I think for us in Newport News, this is a really big deal, because a lot of us are breathing in coal dust. We have high rates of asthma. So if you are out there and you're a business owner and you have any pull with the Chamber of Commerce, if you can really try to get the message that we demand environmental justice policies. This is just about good government. And it's really also about equity and civil rights, and making sure that everybody has the same access to a clean environment. So that would help. And then the last thing I would say is I'm gonna take up the drug price affordability issue again next session. And we hear from our constituents all the time, the burden of high drug prices. But you know, the last time I introduced the drug price affordability board bill, I had a committee room full of lobbyists from Washington trying to block us. And I really think the only way we're going to be able to convince the legislators to get this kind of reform going is if we demand action on it. So, you know, if you all could keep an eye on the drug price affordability board bill and help us say that we need some accountability for drug prices in Virginia, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so political borders are artificial and they're drawn by humans in redistricting. So a lot of the issues that you see in the 94th district that I see in the 95th district, it's the same. It's the same Newport News, along with the 92nd and 96th that with Hampton. And that is an issue that comes up constantly. And so we appreciate you working on that. And what was your favorite moment of the 2021 session?
I really, I got a thrill from my human trafficking bill. It was a pretty simple bill. You know, I wasn't a huge fan of casinos coming to Virginia, but I thought, you know, if they're coming, let's make sure that they do human trafficking recognition training for their employees. And I suggested the bill and got a really good response from the regulator. I believe it was the Lottery Board. And then when we had testimony on the bill, we had all these people lined up in favor of the bill that I didn't even know they were in favor. I had like Hard Rock Cafe and Hard Rock Casino was there. The Family Foundation was there. All these people came out of the woodwork to support the bill. And I just thought, you know, this is a universal idea that we want to make sure everybody understands what human trafficking is and that we're all together in kind of fighting human trafficking. So it was a thrill for me.
Yeah, definitely not a fan of casinos either, especially the way that they are, you know, I think exploitive in a lot of underserved communities. But I will give a shout out to the Newport News hospitality folks, because they push for that as well amongst their own staff. So the hotels and a lot of the amenities that we have in the local area, making sure that they have that same training. So that is super important. So thank you.
I mean, the hotels might be the next frontier, because, you know, if you push out the human trafficking from the casinos, it might go to the hotels. So yeah. I'm going to talk to them about that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your work on that. And then next we have the delegate, Jeff Bourne. straight out of Richmond. The Capitol actually sits within his district, and one of my favorite people to work with. You might know him from his fight for the Marcus alert, and maybe we'll hear some updates on that. If not, I'm going to ask about it, sir, but because we got a question about it. But also the amazing fight that we are still in for qualified immunity. So I do hope that you'll touch on that. If not, I'll bring you back to do that. But Delegate Bourne, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Delegate Price. It's always good to be in your presence, whether virtually or in person. So yeah, I'll take a quick moment to talk about a couple bills that I worked on that were successful, because my batting average this session wasn't quite as good as it has been. But when like us, when you try to push the envelope, sometimes you got to take some L's to get the W's in the long term. First, we'll talk about our continued approach to eliminating discrimination in our housing sector. So a bill that I championed and led on eliminated a local government's ability, their land use committees, their commissions, from discriminating against the end user, the future tenant of a proposed development, as a reason to deny a permit to approve a housing development, whether that be for seniors, whether that be for low-income residents, whether that be for veterans. Discrimination on any basis, using that as a reason to oppose a development is now protected in our fair housing law. Second, and this is the one that I'm most proud of this session, because what we've seen, particularly with Matthew Rushin, until July 1, people are still not able to offer evidence of a mental illness, an intellectual disability, a developmental disability in the guilt phase of a criminal trial. And we know for far too long, we have criminalized mental health issues rather than treated them like the healthcare conditions that they are. And so working with Senator McClellan and lots of stakeholders, we were able to change the law. And so starting July 1, defense attorneys, defendants will now be able to introduce evidence of their mental illness, a diagnosed mental illness or an intellectual disability or a developmental disability in the guilt phase. I think this is, and this is going to be self-serving, but I do think that this is one of the most transformative justice reform measures that we've done over the last couple of years, because the only way you were able to get that in on the guilt phase of a trial is to have your client plead not guilty by reason of insanity. And that is an extremely high hurdle to get over and is very seldomly used. So proud of the work that I was able to, as Don Scott said, sort of have my name as a patron, but obviously standing on the shoulders and shoulder to shoulder with so many people who helped get us to where we will be in a few short weeks. Marcia, you asked about qualified immunity. Again, we're going to continue to push that ball up the hill and run our heads into the wall until we get it done, because it's the right thing to do. It's another critical component of justice reform, and making sure that we increase the transparency and increase the accountability in our justice system and in our policing efforts across this Commonwealth. And so, yeah, those are the three bills. You know, I think a couple that I was obviously proud to just have my name associated with was, and I've said this a lot over the last several months, and that's the Virginia Voting Rights Act. We talk a lot about all the other important issues for Virginia, but foundational to everything that we do and everything we are as a society is the right to vote. And we've seen attempts to restrict that, eliminate people's access to the ballot. But here in Virginia, thanks to the good work of Marcia Price and Senator McClellan, we're actually giving people more opportunity, more access. Delegate Bagby talked about Sunday voting. So we're leading on that because on too many important issues, Virginia's been far behind and on the wrong side of history, but on this one, we're on the right side of history.
Yeah, thanks for that, because I think with so much happening since 2020, you know, a lot of the news went to legalization of marijuana and abolishing the death penalty, but there was so much more that we did and so much more that impacts the everyday lives of people that we're really proud of. So I thank you for uplifting that. And you mostly answered, but so you answered the part about your favorite moment. Let me see.
No,
So,
I didn't. I haven't answered that part yet.
oh, I assumed that that
No,
was your, okay,
no,
I'll
no,
give you
no.
that one.
That was one of the, no, I mean, but we've got a lot of favorite moments, right? Like the budget that we passed and voted on. When I think about the historic investments we made in our HBCUs across this Commonwealth, that's something to really be proud of. But I guess when we talk about the session, I'm talking both 2021 session, 2021 special session, and then reconvene session. And so for me, my favorite moment was being able to vote on a legalization bill that actually legalized marijuana on July 1, because it was too important to get wrong. And so we're thankful for the efforts of everyone who got us to where we are. And so I was just thankful that the governor put that amendment in and made simple possession legal starting July 1, because I do think that's going to have a tremendously positive impact on not seeing the types of disparity that we've seen even after decriminalization of marijuana just a short year ago. So that was probably my favorite moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if you can stick around, because we probably will get some questions about qualified immunity and some of the police reform work that you were leading. So we have 2 more delegates that we're going to hear from. Then I'm going to give a small update on some of the things that I've been working on as well. But back to the hometown, we have Delegate Mugler from the 91st District, and that's based in Hampton. And Delegate Mugler served on the school board in Hampton before coming, much like Delegate Simons, and had a lot of education experience that she brought to the table. And so Delegate Mugler, please take it away.
Thank you, Delegate Price. I appreciate the invitation to join you all today. It's great to see everyone. Apologies for my semi-casual attire. I was knocking doors this afternoon. So anyways, it's great to be here just to talk about a few of my bills that I would call my favorites. Probably House Bill 1918 that was from this past session was a driver safety bill that I brought forward at the request of one of my constituents. It took rise out of a terrible automobile accident that occurred in York County within the 91st District, and 3 young men perished in that automobile accident. And the mother of one of those young men reached out to me and was very interested in making something impactful out of the incident that occurred. And so we moved forward legislation that instituted sort of an across-the-board consistency across Virginia in how the way secondary students, high school students obtain their parking permits. And it includes requiring students to present their driver's permit in order to be issued their parking pass. It's very, very simple, but the driver of the vehicle in the particular accident I'm referring to had been driving to school and had a parking pass and had no driver's license. So this should address similar issues like that. The bill also involved adding to our high school curriculum the dangers of driving distracted and driving at excessive speed, which was also a factor in the accident. And so that was really nice bipartisan bill, had full bipartisan support, and so I'm really proud that it went through with such flying colors, and it was really ended up being, sort of a labor of love and passion for me to help this one mother to bring some closure to the passing of her son. And then I just had a ceremonial bill signing on that bill last week. And so the young man's name was Connor Guido, and so we've referred to it as Connor's Law here in York County. And so it was really meaningful for me to carry that on behalf of a constituent. The other bill that I'll talk about is legislation that occurred in the 2020 session to establish the Office of Offshore Wind. an area of Hampton Roads. It establishes that Hampton Roads is the centerpiece for offshore wind in Virginia. I think that that bill is critically important for two reasons. One is that it really helps us to protect our environment and really shift our reliance from fossil fuel to clean energy sources. And in addition, it's a real jobs creator for our region. And so I'm really proud to have put that legislation forward, and I'm continuing to work on workforce development and other things to establish that industry in Virginia. And certainly we're looking at ways to bring forth manufacturing that will support that industry in Virginia as well. So the last bill I'll talk about is a bill that I put forward in both sessions, 20 and 21. It has not passed. It passed out of committee both years, but gets stalled in appropriations for obvious reasons. It's House Bill 1915, and it is aimed at giving teacher raises in Virginia and really aligning our teacher salaries with the national average. And I think it's a really important bill because we have so many states that border Virginia that are paying their teachers $10,000 and $20,000 more a year than we're paying our teachers in Virginia. And we know for sure that our teachers in Virginia are as good as teachers in Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C. and Maryland. So in fact, our teachers are probably better, but so I'll continue to work on that bill, and am very excited that, you know, that we were able to move it out of committee. And so I'm going to just catapult and right into the last question that you had for us, Delegate Price, and that was what, you know, kind of what was the highlight for me of the session. And I would have to say that it has to tie in with that bill. So while my bill was not passed out of appropriations, we were able to give teachers a 5% raise in our budget through the budget process. And so I think that was really, really important, and I think it's meaningful to our teachers. I think it was, you know, the healthiest raise we've been able to give in probably a decade from the state level. So really proud of that, and you can count on me to be continuing to work on that particular issue.
Awesome. And yeah, I think that we can brag on our teachers as much as we can because they're doing a fantastic job, especially as was said earlier about everything that was going on differently because of COVID. The family stepped up, the students stepped up, and definitely our teachers did as well. So thank you for that, Delegate Mugler. And now we will hear from my partner in crime, my sister, my seatmate, my co-host. We are each other's co-host on At Ease with Sia and LaSharice, and you can check that out on YouTube and also Facebook and in my my link in my bio on Instagram. But Delegate Aird, who represents the 63rd district that is based in Petersburg. And so Delegate Aird, take it away.
Thank you so much, Delegate Price, my fellow sister in crime and fellow seatmate, fellow co-host. Thank you so much for including me on your update to your constituents this afternoon. I am going to do this a little differently and cheat a bit and talk both about a piece of legislation as well as some budget language and budget efforts that we took that really were the highlight for me of this past session. I first want to lift up House Bill 2031. This was legislation that put a de facto ban in place on the use of facial recognition technology. Many of you may be aware that this technology has often been used by our law enforcement agencies, both local, we have discovered state, as well as campus police departments, particularly over in the Hampton Roads area. And now with this legislation, it simply will no longer be allowable. For the fact of the matter is that many of our law enforcement agents are really just trying to get a hand on community policing and increasing the trust among the people that they serve. And what we were finding is that this technology was being used without the knowledge of whose information was being put into these databases, the control of who has access to this information, and unfortunately, misidentifications as a result of these databases that oftentimes show bias towards people of color. And so as a Commonwealth, we've made the policy decision to prohibit the use of these databases until they can be structured in such a way that's more trustworthy, and we can ensure that those who are utilizing them have the appropriate training and understanding of the impact that these databases have. In addition to that, I am going to mention a resolution that I'm extremely proud of. It's not a bill, but it's equally important in my eyes. And this is a resolution that declared racism as a public health crisis here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the reason why I list this as a critical measure, although it is not a bill, is because this has really laid a foundation for us to do a number of things. Number one, starting with having a conversation. My mother used to say that the first step in solving a problem is admitting that you have a problem. And in the Commonwealth of Virginia, racism is absolutely a problem. And specifically, institutional racism, the biases and the barriers that are built into our structures and into our systems, causing a disproportionate impact on one group of people over another. But furthermore, since the passage of this resolution, it's been exciting to see a number of our state agencies, a number of organizations and entities trying to put their hands around how do we both tear up the foundation that is rotten, but lay new foundation that ensures an equitable approach to how we deliver services to all people in an equitable but equal manner. And so that legislation led Virginia to being the first state in the South to do so, and is leading us in a new direction already. And then third, to end with another policy measure that was in the budget, not necessarily a bill, but this was the language that allowed us to provide additional training, as well as a work group for certified doulas. Delegate Price has talked about this so many times with her constituents, so I know you have some familiarity, but there is a crisis here both in the Commonwealth as well as around our country. Black and brown women are dying at higher rates as a result of infants and maternal mortality. And for the last 3 years, we have truly emphasized trying to put an infrastructure in place that both can help us adopt policies that recognize this as a crisis and can help us understand the phenomenon of what's causing this disparity, but then also to increase access to the services and the care that is needed from a preventive standpoint. And both the money as well as the language that we were able to include in the budget from this past cycle really catapults us as a leader in the country in terms of trying to combat this crisis. So I would say I gave you a bit of a smorgasbord, both bills, resolutions, and a little bit of the budget, but those were the 3 highlights for me.
Awesome. And Delegate Aird, I will just let the people know, just in case they haven't heard me talk about it, you and I were definitely watching and listening as Beyonce and Serena Williams and Judge Hatchett were bringing this issue to the forefront, which was, it led to an avalanche of our constituents saying, you know what, that was my experience too, no longer refusing to be silent about the pain or silent about the tragedy, but really speaking up for it. And, you know, unfortunately, when we first spoke up about it in 2019, it was not met with open arms within the administration, but later in the year, it became a top priority of theirs. And I really do think it was because we both said, you know what, we're not going to give up. And we had the tenacity to talk about the issues. You know, sometimes our colleagues on the other side will want us to stop talking about the word systemic, the 2 words systemic racism. And you and I have both faced that. But like you said, if we don't talk about it, then it's not going to get addressed. Not only were we talking about it, we were working on it. And so I appreciate being in the trenches on that with you. You are continuing to do the work to make sure that the implementation of the doulas, you know, certification process and all of that is going. I have a maternal health roundtable with Hampton Roads folks that are working within maternal health, and July is Maternal Health Awareness Month. And so please be on the lookout for some things for us coming there. And then I'm sure we're going to have an episode of At Ease soon, right, Delegate Erin? Okay. All right. Gotta give the people that that give them what they want. So you know, it really is it is a great pleasure working with you and the things that you've been able to accomplish. So I'm just gonna give well, let me see, let me open this up because I don't want to hold the delegates much longer. If you have anything that you want to add, we have questions, but we can, you know, we can talk about those at the end, because I think a lot of the questions about some of these will be answered in the remaining two presentations that we're going to jump into. But opening it up to any delegates for any brief final words before you all depart.
Delegate Price.
Yeah.
Delegate Simon here. So real quickly on this issue of qualified immunity, I will just point out one thing. It became an issue in one of our primary campaigns up here in Northern Virginia. Somebody had played around with his vote on qualified immunity, and that particular vote became a big issue in his primary, which, and I can't say it's the only reason, but a reason that he wasn't reelected. So I think you're going to see some progress on that. It's clearly something that voters actually do care about. I know a lot of people don't, you know, say voters don't care about things like that, but it's something that Democratic voters care about, and it's been something that somebody's paid a price for here. And I think we all sort of learn by watching on that. So I hope that bodes well for our future efforts on qualified immunity.
Delegate Price, just to add to what my good friend Delegate Simon mentioned, my heart was warm this primary season because I think every single statewide candidate in the Democratic primary, no matter you're talking about governor, lieutenant governor, I think even both attorney generals, I'm not sure though, said that they're supportive of ending qualified and sovereign immunity in Virginia. So it'll be good to have those voices from those pulpits in 2022.
Awesome. And Delegate Herring, did you want to say anything else about legalization?
No, that is no,
Okay.
It's just ongoing. And just, well, the only thing is just caution. Look, if it's in your car vehicle, put it in the trunk, put it away from in the cabin area, just to be safe. Starting on July 1, if you are have simple possession. The only other thing I would add is that Court of Appeals, we did expand it, and so we'll be appointing judges this summer. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome, awesome. So delegates, thank you all so much for your time. And we, again, have recorded this conversation. It will be on our website and social media should you have any other questions coming from the conversation. But now we want to switch to our presentations. And then after that, I'll give you an update on my bills, but definitely want to have our guests get the rest of their evening back. And so first we're going to hear from Ashley Kenneth, who is the president of the Commonwealth Institute, newly named president of the Commonwealth Institute. The Commonwealth Institute is a amazing resource, and a lot of us go to them for crunching of the numbers, and so they really break down some of the larger, more philosophical issues into the nuts and bolts of numbers. And it was really important for me, even though the American Rescue Plan is not a federal, I mean, it is a federal bill, it's not a state bill, the money is coming to the state along with localities and along to your pockets. So we wanted to do a brief breakdown, but for more information after this on the American Rescue Plan, you can go to Congressman Scott, Congressman McEachin, Congressman Connolly's websites, and they have more information on the American Rescue Plan. But we did want to hear a little bit about what does it mean for Virginia? What does it mean for the 95th District? So Ashley, take it away.
Can you hear me okay? I appreciate the opportunity to join you this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and your constituents in the 95th. It was really inspiring to hear about some of the new laws that are going to be going into effect next month. And so I did want to note before I get into talking about the American Rescue Plan, that we're still celebrating some of the other wins from recent years, such as the decision to expand Medicaid in 2018. And as of June 1st, over 12,000 people in Hampton and 17,000 adults in Newport News now have access to comprehensive health coverage thanks to Medicaid expansion. And as Delegate Ward mentioned, there was legislation in 2020 to raise the minimum wage, and many people who live in the area already are or will soon benefit from that. As of 2019, there were over 8,800 people living in Hampton and 14,000 people living in Newport News who work full-time, yet make under $25,000 a year, which means that they will likely see a raise. But as you mentioned, one of the primary issues I wanted to discuss today is the American Rescue Plan Act, also called ARPA, which is a federal law that was passed on March 11th, and it's an enormous and historic package containing 1.9 trillion in relief measures. And soon lawmakers in Virginia will meet in a special session to discuss how to implement some of this new funding that Virginia is slated to receive. ARPA provides both flexible and targeted funding for the state of Virginia for all Virginia cities and counties, public and private universities, and Virginia tribes, as well as direct relief for families. And it provides an opportunity for us to do things differently in Virginia, to not only plan for recovery from the pandemic, but to also plan for our future and to make sure that we build a Virginia that where all of us have the resources and the supports that will allow us to thrive. A foundational provision of ARPA was the economic impact payments. About 84% of Virginia taxpayers received the stimulus, and the average rebate for Virginians was $2,650. ARPA also made significant changes to the Earned Income Tax Credit, or the EITC, and the Child Tax Credit, or the CTC. Data from 2018 shows us that about 600,000 families in Virginia received the federal EITC, including about 9,600 people in the 95th district. And 435,000 families with low incomes received the federal child tax credit across Virginia. So we know that these credits are incredibly important for lifting many low-income people above the poverty level. ARPA temporarily boosts the federal EITC for working people who do not have qualifying children, and this could impact up to 520,000 Virginians. It also increased and expanded the child tax credit. The bill makes the full CTC available to children and families with low earnings or that lack earnings in a year, and it increases the credit's maximum amount to $3,000 per child and $3,600 for children under age 6. Up to half of that money is being distributed in advance, which means families are going to start receiving that money in monthly installments as early as July. In order to receive those monthly payments, it's really important that all families with children make sure that they file their 2020 tax returns as soon as possible to make sure that they're eligible for the appropriate amount of the child tax credit, as well as any other credits they may be eligible for, such as the Earned Income Tax Credit. The changes to the CTC will help up to 1.8 million children in Virginia and will nearly cut childhood poverty in half. However, the changes to the CTC and to the EITC are temporary. They're only for this year. So there is an opportunity to advocate for Congress to make these changes permanent. ARPA also created the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which has several pots of money for the state, which is expected to receive nearly $4 billion, as well as funding that's being directed directly to localities. These are flexible funds that can be used to cover a number of different things through December of 2024. And advocacy is needed to make sure that decision makers direct the funds to help those who need it most. It can be used for things like housing services, boosting incomes for essential workers, providing clean water, and outreach support to make sure people know about all of those changes. ARPA also includes the largest single investment in K-12 education by the federal government. Virginia is receiving $2.1 billion for schools, and 90% of that money is going directly to local divisions who will have control over the spending of those funds. ARPA expands access to healthcare. Marketplace premium credits were enhanced for many families, making it possible for many more people to afford health insurance. The Act really does so much more in so many other areas like higher education and housing and unemployment insurance. But those were just a few of the issues that I wanted to highlight for you today. TCI is working on a brief explainer that should be available in the coming weeks to highlight many of the various streams of funding And we're also going to be releasing some analysis soon on the child tax credit, not only supporting, making those changes permanent, but looking at if and how Virginia could create our own state level child tax credit to provide even more support for families. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I just have to reiterate, the work that you all do is invaluable to get us, we're a part-time legislature. And so to really get the impact of the things that we're doing, you also follow up, once bills have been implemented to make sure that they're going the way that they should. And I do hope to continue really breaching the conversation about what is the way that we tax in Virginia, what are the ways that we come up with revenues, and really looking at the money of Virginia in a global perspective, especially for those that really need more resources. So thank you so much for your work, and we'll get those numbers from you so that we can put that in the follow-up email in case anybody wants to just see what the impact is that is coming to the 95th district. So thank you. And next we will hear from Laura Wright, who is, my goodness, I have spent more time with Laura this past year, but being on the housing subcommittee, a lot of the bills that I carry are about housing justice. And the Virginia Poverty Law Center is front and center in that fight, along with legal aid being there in the courts. We in the legislature have been working hand in hand on housing legislation. And it was really important for me because we respond to constituents. The constituent concerns and questions have been revolving around, okay, if the eviction moratorium is about to end, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my family? What does that mean for my friends? And so we wanted to give that an update. We also know that legal aid brought a lawsuit about the terrible job, honestly, that the Employment Commission has been on getting unemployment into the pockets of people where it is eligible. And so our office has gotten calls. I know many of the other delegates and senators and even Congress people have been getting calls about that. So a little bit of an update on that and the lawsuit and what does that mean. We'll also hear from my Chief of Staff, Tempest, with some tips and tricks on what she's hearing, having to deal with a lot of those calls and help folks get their money. So Laura, thank you for your work, and take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to share my screen because I have a lot of information to share. And just know that anything that I have here is also available on our website, vplc.org. And as Delegate Price mentioned, some of the tenant protections that were put in place due to COVID are going away at the end of the month. There's two of them. One is one that was actually passed by Virginia during the special session as part of a budget bill. And that required landlords to apply for rental assistance on tenants' behalf, as well as provide information about that program to tenants. But come July 1st, they will no longer be required to provide that information or apply on the tenant's behalf. We still strongly encourage landlords to apply for those funds because it is not a loan. It can pay up a whole lot of money, which I'll go over shortly. The second is that the federal eviction moratorium from the Centers for Disease Control is also going to expire at the end of the month. So starting July 1st, a lot of those eviction cases that had been on hold due to the pandemic will be rolling out, and the courts will start entering that judgment for possession that allows landlords to do the eviction. Sheriffs will be allowed to carry out evictions again. But there are still some protections in place, and both of these are thanks to the hard work of Delegate Price and advocating for tenants. And one of them, with the end of that state of emergency at the end of the month, it also puts the clock on a protection that she got fixed last year that allows you to delay your case for 60 days. There are some limitations on that. You have to show that you had a loss of income due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It could be because you're laid off or you were furloughed or you had reduced hours. And you have to bring that proof with you when you go to court. So make sure that you show up to court, you bring that paperwork with you, and then you can ask the judge to continue your case for 60 days. That continuance doesn't make your eviction case go away. It just is there to give you more time to catch up on rent. So this option will be available until September 28th of this year. So, don't sit on this, in the meantime, try to get relief. And the second one, which is another Delegate Price bill, is one of the protections that got passed during special session, we were trying to make it a permanent part, but we just delayed when it expires. So through July 1st of 2022, so you still have this option for another year and hopefully permanently. If you are behind on your rent, the landlord has to give you a 14-day notice. That means that you have 14 days to either pay the rent, voluntarily leave, try to get that money together and pay up, or you can enter into a payment plan with your landlord. This allows you to get on a payment plan for 6 months with equal monthly installments on top of your monthly rent. Now, if you have less than 6 months on your lease, it would just be for however long is left. So if you have 4 months left on your lease, you get 4 monthly payments. And during that time, the landlord can't add on extra late fees as long as you're making those timely payments. So this is a really important tool if you're behind on rent, you're waiting to get that rent relief to try to catch up. But I think the big takeaway is that Virginia has a lot of rent relief funds from the federal government and match funds that they got started a lot quicker than other states to help people catch up on rent. So the Virginia Rent Relief Program, it's free emergency rental assistance. It is not a loan. Payments go directly to the landlord. It'll cover any rent arrearages dating back to April 1st of 2020. So all the way from the beginning of the pandemic. Currently, the money can be used to cover up to 15 months worth of rent, but come July, there'll be another pot of money coming that allows them to cover up to 18 months of rent. In addition to covering arrearages, they can cover up to 3 months of prospective rent. So, even if you've been able to catch up, pay up rent to this point, but you're struggling, you need help with the next 3 months, still apply because they can pay in advance as long as you have the lease covering that period. And they'll cover everything that is covered under your lease. So if your lease says you're paying, water through your landlord, if you have any late fees, the rental assistance program will pay up that amount as well, anything covered under the lease. Additionally, if you have a housing subsidy, so if you're living in public housing or if you have a voucher, they can also pay up any rental arrearages and up to 1 month's rent. But they do want you to do that income recertification with your public housing authority. There are some requirements, but they're trying to be as flexible as possible. So you have to have, a lease. If you don't have a written lease, something showing that there's that landlord-tenant relationship is fine. Try to get something in writing. I know that we've had plenty of legal aid attorneys who just get a very short written thing showing when the lease began, when it ends, how much that monthly rent is, just to make sure that you can get those funds approved. You do have to show that you lost income during the pandemic. They're not looking to see that there's a direct tie, but it could be any number of things. You were laid off, you had a loss of child support during that time, you had to stay home to care for kids, you're unable to find work. Really, they're trying to be as flexible as possible to try to get rent relief to as many people as possible. And your rental amount has to be at or below 150% fair market rate. So basically, as long as you don't live in some luxury condo, you should be covered. And it only goes for folks who have make 80% or below the area median income, but that amount really depends on your family size. So the important information you really need to know is where to apply. There's 2 ways to apply. You can apply online. You should be able to find it pretty simply with a Google search of DHCD Rent Relief Program or the website here. You can also apply by phone. And if you've already applied, but you're waiting to hear back, there's an email you can go to. It's rrp@dhcd.virginia.gov to get a status update, figure out if there's any missing paperwork. There's also a link there to check and see if you're eligible for rent relief. And also landlords, you can still apply on behalf of tenants through Virginia Housing. I have the website and email there for you. I strongly encourage landlords to do this. It just makes it easier if you're applying for a whole bunch of tenants at one time to get that money in. And I think it goes a little bit faster for landlords than for tenants, because the landlords, you have most of the paperwork that's required. Really, the only thing the tenant is submitting is just proof of their income. Oops. Oh, how did I do that? All right, sorry about that. The second thing I want to mention is there's also the end of the utility shutoff moratorium that'll end 60 days after the state of emergency. So if you are behind in utilities, contact your utility provider now to get on a payment plan. You have the right to a 24-month plan, but really, figure out how much you can afford to make installments on top of your monthly utility bill so that it's something that you can afford and still stay in good standing. And as I mentioned, if your utilities are covered under your lease, then the Virginia Rent Relief Program can cover that. And if your bill is too high, there are some programs out there to help bring that energy bill down. You can look at the DHCD Weatherization Assistance Program. And you can also contact your local utility provider and ask them about how you can reduce your energy costs. And lastly, if you have issues trying to get it on a payment plan or how to get involved in one of these programs, you can always call our utility helpline at 804-313-9363. And lastly, I wanted to touch on updates around the Virginia Employment Commission lawsuit. So Virginia was doing pretty bad when it comes to getting out employment benefits, both for people who are applying for the first time, but also those who were initially receiving benefits, but then for whatever reason, those benefits were improperly terminated without giving those folks a chance to appeal their case. So at the end of May, a federal court entered an order directing the Employment Commission to end that backlog of unpaid unemployment insurance claims and to pay those folks whose benefits were improperly terminated. So they have until Labor Day, till the end of the summer to get through that entire backlog. So this means that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of Virginians who are able to get those unemployment benefits or wrongly denied. So just to break down some of those numbers, that they have to issue at least 10,000 adjudications per week in by July 1. And after that, have to do an additional 20,000 adjudications per week by August 1st. So they have a lot of work to do over the summer, and we're going to be making sure that they're keeping up with that order. In the meantime, if you need help, applying or figuring out the status of your case, you can reach out to your local legal aid office. BPLC currently we're not able to provide individual representation or assistance, but you should definitely reach out to your local legal aid office for that. And if you want more detailed information about that lawsuit, you can go to justiceforall.org/UI. There's a lot more information there about how they're supposed to be rolling out additional staffing, how they're going to handle this backlog. So yes, if you're waiting for assistance, you should be getting something by the end of the summer. And lastly, I know I've been trying to get through this really quickly, but if you have any questions, about your eviction case, definitely reach out to our eviction legal helpline. We also have been doing some recordings that are up on our YouTube channel about the new landlord-tenant laws and more detailed information about these tenant protections that you should check out. And if you just are looking for general information as you're right as a tenant, you can go to housing.bplc.org. All right, thanks. I'll turn it back over to the delegate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. And y'all, I dropped some links in the chat. Again, all of these links will be in the follow-up email along with the slides and how to get in touch with Laura's friends at the Virginia Poverty Law Center or legal aid, depending upon what your issue might be. But just also want to remind you that if you are facing an eviction or if someone that you know is facing an eviction, the key really is to call as soon as possible. And so I dropped that eviction hotline information in there. The sooner you deal with it, the I won't say easier because evictions are hard, but the better you might be able to get some positive resolution to that. And I know we've talked about a lot dealing with the fact of COVID related, but just understand some of the laws that we did in 2020 before there even was a pandemic really did start to address you know, how Virginia, 2019, 2017, and before, we ended up in the national news because 5 of the top 10 cities for the number of evictions that were occurring were in Virginia. 2 were Hampton and Newport News, and we knew that we had to do something about that. So the housing laws that we've been putting in place, we're working to equalize the relationship between the tenant and the landlord, and really about information and dissemination. So the Bill of Rights for the tenants, what you need to know your rights in order to know what the landlord is supposed to be doing. The landlord needs to know their rights in order to know what the tenant is doing, and really trying to make it a good relationship, because we do want smaller landlords to stay in our area, but we want to make sure that they're treating people right. And so it's this balance that we're working on. But again, I thank both Ashley and Laura for bringing such important information. We'll send you this recording along with all of that other information as well. I wanted to now bring on, we're closing soon, but I wanted to bring on Tempest Boone, who is my chief of staff, to discuss just some tips and tricks that you're finding. And I do want to, one quick disclosure. We do not run the VEC. It is a entity within the administration. Our office can help you get to the right place, can help you find more information. But unfortunately, if I could, I would go in there and fix it, but I can't. But what we are going to do is try and get as much information as possible. We have been fielding lots and lots of calls from constituents. We understand your frustrations. There are some things that we are doing legally to try and fix the system. I know that we've, Delegate Hudson had a bill that we passed. We're also putting money into how to revamp the system, but those are for down the line kind of fixes. It's really going to be up to the executive branch to step up and do this and understand that folks really need their unemployment benefits. So Tempest, is there anything that you wanted to share so that folks would understand a little bit about the process?
Yes, thank you. So first I'll go over the process for our office when you contact us with the VEC issue. So once you contact us, which is either by phone call and you can leave a voicemail. Also, our office can receive text messages or through email. I will follow up with you by phone call to get more information about what's going on in your case. The VEC requires that we send certain information so that they can identify who you are before they reach out to you. So I'll call to get that information. Once I receive that, I will send them an email requesting that they follow up with you. The process now is for them to follow up with you by email. So please check your spam folder or your junk folder, because you should receive an email from them. If you email our office, please do not send your full social security number. Okay, a lot of people do that. Please, you don't need to do that for our office. I will follow up with you to get that information that we need from you. Once I send your information to the VEC, they no longer correspond with our office. They will follow up with you, the claimant, directly. So I ask that our constituents stay in constant contact with me so I can assess if you need additional assistance. I understand that there is a lag in resolving issues on claims, which should hopefully improve within the next few months. So I will try to provide information about resources in the community that can assist you in the meantime while we're waiting for your claim to be adjudicated. Some things that I want you to know: constantly check your Gov2Go account or your email routinely for messages from the VEC. There are 3 ways that they will contact you: mostly by mail, by email, or through the Gov2Go app. Occasionally, they will call you by phone if they need additional information. And last but not least, if you have any questions or if something does not seem clear, please reach out to us first. We've had a lot of people who have filled out questions, unfortunately wrong, because they misunderstood the question. And sometimes that causes a delay in payment or a disqualification. So it's important for you to have all of the information that's necessary so that you can answer the questions as accurately as possible. If you have any questions, you can check the VEC's website for more information, or you can contact your representative and we can follow up with the VEC so that we make sure that you get the correct information. Thank you.
Awesome. And I know that there was some conversation that we had with the Unemployment Commission, and just off jump, if you are able to work, even if you are scared to work because of the pandemic, if you are physically able to work, you got to answer yes for that first question in order to be eligible for the benefits. So some folks were misunderstanding that question, and then unfortunately they got sent into this system where they're now waiting to hear from someone. But if you are able to work, even if it's trepidation or hesitancy, that first question of are you able to work is the first thing that gets you in the door for those unemployment benefits. So just know that. So
and also one more thing, I'm
sure.
sorry.
No, go for it.
Our local VEC office will be open by appointment only starting July the 1st. So hopefully they can help fill some of these phone calls and questions.
Yeah, and we'll have the phone numbers and everything for from Laura's presentation specific to the 95th district coming up. So Tempest, thank you so much for that. Oh, sorry, because I didn't give an update. I want to give a quick update on some of the bills that I worked on, and then we're going to hop into your questions. So thank you for sticking with us. We're going to get your questions answered. So you heard some folks talking about the Voting Rights Act of Virginia, and I just wanted everyone to know that, you know, we have done interviews and television interviews and New York Times, AP, and of course the local folks that were covering this, because the Voting Rights Act of Virginia is so huge. We knew that we needed to get the protections of the federal level Voting Rights Act of 1965 in place in our state, because we knew what was coming and what we're seeing in Georgia and Florida and Texas and Arizona. We didn't want Virginia to be that. And so we were able to pass that. We'll send along a little bit more information. But also, if you're regularly voting and you have tried to use curbside voting around the state, it was just kind of up to the local area how they went about curbside voting. But some folks had to get out of the car to go in to tell someone that they wanted to vote curbside. And we knew that that was impacting the number of people that could actually use it and it be curbside. And so you may have seen, especially in Newport News, if you voted in the primary, you may have seen the signs that have a phone number for you to call when you pull up, and then you let them know that you like to vote curbside. You stay in your car, someone comes out to you, they'll ask you for your ID, they go back in, and then they bring the ballot out to you. That is something that we worked on to make sure, and we worked with the Disability Law Center in order to get that bill done. Then in 2020, we did the Human Rights Act, and it was basically helping to end discrimination within housing and within employment. And this year we were able to add domestic workers into that, so the domestic workers can have the assurance that they have the same protections as other workers, especially because the work that they do cares for our family, cares for our homes, and just allows for us to do the work that we do. So we want to make sure that they're able to do that work with dignity. And a lot of the domestic workers in Virginia are women of color. So we want to make sure that they have those protections. As you heard from Laura, we had House Bill 1889 that extended the payment plans and the 14-day pay or quit. Virginia had a 5-day pay or quit. We now have a 14-day pay or quit, and it extended that for an additional year. We're going to work to make that permanent. And then we had a bill that allowed for people to use their right of a redemption, meaning that they pay everything that they owe up to 2 days before an eviction. So if you're able to pay everything you owe, you should be able to stop an eviction and stay in your home. Now you can. And so the bill from last year, House Bill 340, that we improved this year is still intact. And that's what she was talking about. If you are on the verge of foreclosure, you have 30 additional days that you can hold off that case. And if you're on the verge of an eviction, you have 60 additional days that you can hold off that case. And you can use that up to 90 days after the emergency order ends. And so really proud of the work we did there. Then we had 2 resolutions as well. One was developing a work group that studies the overlap between mental health and criminal justice reform, and seeing where can we look at the data to see how can we have better outcomes so that mental health is health and criminal justice is public safety. And so that is going to be studied in making sure that people are getting the help that they need and not being punished for having a mental health disorder or a mental health concern. And then we were hearing from a lot of providers, private providers that are doing really good work in behavioral and mental health in our area, but they were being unfairly treated by the managed care organizations, and there was some miscommunication. So we're going to investigate and see what's going on. And that was House Joint Resolution 577, legislation, but instead of it going through an actual work group, the oversight committee of the Appropriations Committee under the leadership of Delegate Sickles is actually going to look into that and see what is really going on with the terminations from the providers. Because if somebody needs mental health care, they should be able to go to who they want to go to so that they feel comfortable with their provider. And so anything that is impacting that, we are definitely going to try and see what is going on. So that's just an update of what we did. Again, we had a bill limit because we were trying to get everything done virtually, but you can visit my website, delegatemarciaprice.com, to see the bills that I worked on in 2020 and previous sessions, and also the special session for police reform. I know there was a question about that we got in with the registration. We had a whole special session at the end of 2020. It was August to November. And we really tackled COVID relief and police reform. And it could be a whole town hall on that. So I'll make sure that we have links on answers to all of your questions that you asked at registration, but a link to the police reform bills that we passed. We made significant progress. And so shout out to all of the protesters and advocates and experts that really created a perfect storm for the political will to be there, for it to be something that was prioritized. And so we were able to get things done. And shout out to the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus members who have been fighting for these items. One of the bills that I carried, I've been carrying 3-4 times. And so now it was able to pass. And so we're really glad about that. We had a question about gun violence prevention. So let's see, Newport News, Hampton, Norfolk, Roanoke, Petersburg, and Richmond were each awarded or had the chance to apply for a $25,000 community assessment grant. What we're trying to do is, on the federal level, there are millions of dollars that are specific to gun violence prevention. Some of that money is coming from the American Rescue Plan. Some of it is there from the funding of the youth, well, I forgot, I think it was the Justice, the Juvenile Justice Act that Congressman Scott passed. But if you know the work that he's been doing, he was working on the Youth Promise Act for years and years and years. It had gotten passed, but now it's gotten passed and appropriated. And so there are these funds that are available. So what we're trying to do is help those 6 cities be in the best position as possible to do the full community assessment. Who are the boots on the ground that are actually impacting gun violence prevention? What are the programs that the city has or that universities have or other partners have? But what are the voids, so that we know specifically what to apply for and where that money should go, and know that it's going to go directly to gun violence prevention. And so that's something that we're doing here in the area. We talk with the city of Newport News and Hampton. They have applied for the money, and they're going to partner with educational institutions. So if it's CNU and HU, they're going to help them do those program assessments. But we really want to get to the heart of what's going well, what needs to be better, so that we can then apply for the millions that are available in order to do that. And also for the city budget money and state budget money to know how to best attack the root causes of gun violence prevention. This is in addition to the historic legislation that we got passed last year that really gets at access to firearms by people that should not have them. And so, some folks are like, oh, they're coming for your guns. No, if you're not a domestic abuser, if you're not at risk of hurting yourself or someone else, then it's a background check. And so if you are able to have a firearm, then they are available. The laws that we put into place, we're making sure that we get the guns out of the hands of folks that do not need them. And so really proud about the work that we did there, especially a bill that we got passed that allows for localities to have more say over their own buildings in order for them to have ordinances that deal with guns on public property. And then this year we added to that and added that the school boards would also have such availability, so that they can make sure that they're protecting and keeping our schools safe as well. Talked to a lot of students, and they just want to be safe so that they can excel at school. That's not a lot to ask. And so we stood up and we showed up for them. Had a question about childcare in the chat and also at registration. So wanted to let folks know about the child tax credits, but there was also Congressman Scott was visiting a child care center recently. And in the American Rescue Plan, there is something that was modeled after Congressman Scott and Patty Murphy's Child Care for Working Families Act. So it's in the some of it is in the ARP funding, but it's also in the American Families Plan. And so we can definitely get more information on that from the federal level. But then on the state level, we had Speaker Fillercorn's bill, and I think Congressman Scott might actually be on the call today. So thank you so much for the hard work that you're doing as the chair of the Education and Labor Committee, making sure that folks are taken care of. Really big and bold legislation that's coming out of the House. And so we just need to make sure that the Senate passes it, and so it gets fully funded. But Speaker Eileen Fillercorn passed House Bill 2206, which is the Child Care Assistance Program. So basically, it allows for even more families to be eligible for this, and that is up to 85% of the state median income in order to enroll in the child care subsidy program. And so what it did was it expanded who was eligible in order to get those benefits. So we'll include a breakdown of that information, but we understand that if you don't have childcare, you can't get back to work. That impacts the economy, that impacts your family, that impacts your trajectory towards success, and we get that. And so we are answering to the COVID crisis, but also looking at long-term plans outside of that. There was a question on substance use disorders and making sure that there was help available. And what we're working on is really fully funding mental health. And so substance use disorder falls under mental health. I serve on the Deeds Commission, which is about to end because that was a temporary work group, but we're establishing the Behavioral Health Commission. And so I just got a note from Speaker Fillercorn that I've been appointed to that so that we can continue these conversations. I'm the immediate past chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. And one of the things is beyond just the work of education and prevention, we have to make sure that we're fully funding the mental health care system and making sure that the workforce development within that system allows for the people that need to be there in order to help those and who are in their time of need are there, and that they're paid well to do the work that they're doing. We've also worked on legislation over the years for peer counselors. Peer counselors do an amazing job of showing up to support folks, knowing what they know from their lived experience and being able to really connect with folks. So shout out to all the peer counselors. You guys are doing amazing work. The qualified mental health professionals that are out there, we had legislation to make sure that you can do your work and also get reimbursement from that. And then we also worked with the social workers who are involved in this as well, making sure that the families are safe when issues arise and making sure that they're able to get the training that they need to become licensed. And so really just attacking some of these issues from the root causes and making sure that the professionals are there. So we are prioritizing funding for mental health, which does include the substance use disorder. So then we had another question, which I thought was super interesting and very timely, but it was about clearing up misinformation about critical race theory. And so I'm often on the Pastor Study radio show. And so I think this might have been from a teacher, but someone probably in the school system. So I'm really happy for the question. So sometimes in order to sow seeds of division, there are buzzwords that are used. And if you really define what critical race theory is, it is acknowledging the truth of our history in order to teach our history better. Critical race theory itself, though, is on the master's and PhD level. So in Virginia, I know that we've seen in other states that folks are like trying to ban critical race theory. It's not a thing. Like, it's just not being taught to third graders, this, PhD level thing. But what we do have is a bill that was carried by Delegate Jenkins out of Suffolk and our very own Senator Mamie Locke here in Newport News and Hampton. And that is a cultural competency bill that allows for teachers to be fully trained in how to talk about our history in a way where it honors the truth and also honors the sensitivity. So building relationships to understand your students, to understand the history that might be impacting their current lived experience, and really getting to truth telling. It was very disturbing to me to find that anywhere in our country that enslavement of African human beings was being described as a happy or an okay thing, as to really wash away the truth of the matter, the truth that for 401 years, there have been atrocities that have been plagued on the African-American community. So it doesn't mean that we have to go into a master's level thesis about it, but if we're going to talk about the Civil War, if we're going to talk about enslavement, that we have to do it in a truthful manner. So don't mind the buzzwords, don't mind the dog whistles, don't mind what's going on in other states. In our state, we are trying to make sure that every single teacher is equipped to teach facts. Period. And so really excited about that. The governor came down to Woodside High School this week, and we had that bill signing. So I'll make sure that there's more information on that. Then for COVID relief, we got a question about COVID relief. So there are lots of things available. So I want to make sure that you all have the information. So say for instance, if you unfortunately lost a loved one, as the nation gets to 600,000 people that we have lost, that's like the size of 3 Newport Newses of people that we have lost to this pandemic. If you have lost someone, or if you know of somebody who died from COVID, please make sure that your family or their family knows about the $7,000 from FEMA that is available to help families pay for the cost of burying their loved ones due to COVID. There's also, as was stated, there is a federal rent relief, a state rent relief, but also your locality might have a rent relief. I know that Newport News had one, Hampton had one, and as the American Rescue Plan Act funds come in, they know that housing is an issue, so that I'm sure that we'll have more local resources available. But then there's also the vaccination. As I said earlier, we are able to start getting out and moving around and about. I got to see people. We went back to in-person church for at least one Sunday today, fully masked and keeping our distance, but it was so good to be in the presence of my people, right? And so that is because of vaccinations. And excuse me, I just was corrected. The FEMA is actually up to $9,000. I thought it was $7,000, but it's $9,000. So thank you for that. But really being able to get out there, please, if you have questions about the vaccination, ask the professionals. And if you are interested in getting your shot, there are private providers through the drugstores, but there are also the 2 centers that will make sure you have that money, that information. These are free, no appointment needed. You walk into the Coliseum during the hours of operation and you can get your first dose, and then they'll have an appointment for you to come back for your second dose. So more COVID relief is coming though, because as I stated, we are going into special session. And so what does that mean? That means that in probably the beginning of August, the date hasn't been set yet, the governor has let us know, hey, about I'm going to say $4.3 billion is coming into the state. Well, we just passed some budget language that says, you know what, if any more funds come into the state, the legislature has to be the one that decides where that goes. And so we are going to go into special session, lots of work with the appropriation subcommittees and committees, and then we will pass an amended budget of sorts of how we will be spending that money. So if you have funding priorities like housing, like utility relief and rent relief and affordable housing in general, this would have to be one-time spending. So we can't, I think that's like one of the strings that's on it. We can't establish ongoing funding with the funds, but that one-time funding. So helping people pay their rent, helping small businesses get back on their feet, helping really boost our economy that did take a hit, but not as big of a hit as it could have been because of the things that we had in place prior to the pandemic. That's what we'll be discussing in special session. So those were the questions that we had. And I just want to say, again, you can check delegatemarciaprice.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, YouTube, and we try to put out as much information as possible. You also answered at registration what were some of the things that you wanted to hear in our e-newsletters. So if you have not signed up, you can go to delegatemarciaprice.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, enter in your information, and then those updates will come straight to you. We're going to look and see what you said you wanted to hear more of, and then we will certainly add that. So I want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We'll get this up on the website and social media as soon as possible. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions as well. I know we are having to balance the fact that so much got passed and so much help is coming, but it hasn't gotten to everyone just yet. And so while we are celebrating all of the good work that was accomplished, we are also 100% acknowledging that until everyone is happy, safe, healthy, and free, we have more work to do, and we will do that. So thank you so much, and thank you to the delegates and presenters that we had with us. And of course, thank you to my Chief of Staff, Tempest Boone, for all of her hard work. Thank you for attending, and we'll see you soon.